Your home isn't stressful because of what's wrong with it. It's stressful because of what's in it. And there is a very specific difference between those two things. Something wrong with a home needs repair, a leak, a broken fixture, an actual problem. Too much simply, and it needs nothing broken to fix it all, just 5 specific, deliberate reductions most people have never once considered making. 5 habits. None of them require renovation, new furniture, or a single dollar of spending you weren't already prepared to make. And together they explain why a small, sparsely furnished Japanese apartment can feel more genuinely calm to walk into than a much larger Western home filled with more furniture, more decoration, and more of almost everything, using less, not more, of nearly everything in the room. Stay with me until habit number 5, because number 5 is the one that determines whether a peaceful home stays peaceful for years, or slowly, quietly refills itself back to where it started within a few months of the initial effort. But first, habit number 3 is the one that's going to surprise you, because it's not about furniture, color, or clutter in the way you'd expect. It's about something running behind almost everything in your home, completely unnoticed, until you actually see what happens once it's gone. Let's begin. Most of us think about making a home feel peaceful the wrong way. We add to it a candle, a plant, a piece of art, another soft throw blanket, treating peacefulness as something accumulated, layer by layer, the same way we'd accumulate anything else we wanted more of. The room fills up. It rarely feels calmer. Japan approaches this from the opposite direction. There's a concept behind this called the deliberate, intentional use of empty space, treated not as an absence of something but as an active, meaningful element in its own right, as important to a room's feeling as anything actually placed in it. And there's the broader aesthetic principle of Wabi-Sabi, finding a settled, quiet beauty in simplicity and restraint, rather than in abundance or ornamentation. 5 habits. Each one a reduction, not an addition. Each one the difference between a room your eyes have to actively work to process and one they can simply rest in. Let's go through every single one. Habit number 1. Deliberate empty space, surfaces and walls left visibly, intentionally uncovered. You probably assumed that a well-decorated home means filling the available space, every wall holding something, every shelf and surface styled with objects, nothing left visibly bare. Stay with me, because this instinct, followed consistently, is one of the primary reasons a fully decorated room can still feel unsettled rather than calm. Here's the mechanism. Your visual cortex processes a scene by scanning and categorizing everything within it, and the amount of visual information present in a space directly determines how much ongoing, low-level cognitive processing that space demands from you every time you're in it. Research on visual complexity and cognitive load has found that highly visually dense environments, rooms with a great deal of pattern, object, and detail packed into the visual field, require measurably more sustained attentional processing than sparser environments, even when a person isn't consciously examining anything in particular. This processing happens continuously, below conscious awareness, which is precisely why a cluttered room can leave you feeling subtly drained after time spent in it, without ever being able to point to a specific cause. Treats deliberately empty wall and surface space not as unfinished decorating, but as an active design choice that gives the eye, and the mind behind it, genuine places to rest between points of visual interest, rather than scanning continuously across an unbroken field of things to process. The shift, the same room, with even a modest amount of its surfaces and walls deliberately left empty instead of fully covered, requires measurably less ongoing visual processing from anyone in it, a difference your eyes register as calm, even if you never consciously notice why. That is habit number 1. Now, habit number 2 is where this gets interesting, because it's about something that affects every single object in the room at once, without touching any of them individually. Habit number 2. A limited, muted color palette across the entire space, rather than a wide range of competing colors. Most homes accumulate color somewhat randomly over time, furniture bought at different points, decor chosen individually for how it looked in isolation rather than how it interacts with everything else already in the room. The cumulative effect, even when every individual piece is attractive on its own, is often a visually busy space with far more competing colors than anyone consciously intended. Here's the mechanism. Color research on visual perception has found that a scene containing many distinct, high-saturation colors requires more active visual discrimination. Your brain has to continuously distinguish and categorize each color separately, compared to a scene built around a narrow, muted, closely related palette, which the visual system can process more holistically, as a single cohesive field rather than a series of separate elements competing for attention. This is part of why a room built entirely around soft neutrals, muted earth tones, or a narrow tonal range tends to feel calmer than an equally well-decorated room built around many bright, competing colors, even when both rooms are objectively attractive. Traditional Japanese interiors lean heavily toward a muted, natural palette, wood tones, soft neutrals, muted greens and grays, largely avoiding the kind of high-contrast, high-saturation color combinations more common in many Western interior styles. The shift, the same collection of furniture and decor, unified under a narrow, muted color palette instead of a wide range of competing tones, becomes visually easier to process as a single, cohesive space, reducing the low-level discrimination work your eyes are doing without you ever consciously noticing the colors were the source of the effort. That is habit number 2. Now, habit number 3, the one I mentioned at the very beginning. Stay right here, because this is something running behind almost everything in your home that you probably never once considered as a design problem. Habit number 3. Visible cords, cables, and technology are hidden, bundled, or removed from the sightline entirely. Slow down here, because I know what you're thinking, that a few visible cords can't possibly matter as much as furniture, color, or clutter. Here's what's actually happening, and why this specific category of visual noise tends to go completely unaddressed in most homes. Here's the mechanism. Unlike furniture or decor, which are typically chosen deliberately and therefore visually belong to the room in some intentional way, cords and cables are almost always unplanned, tangled, and visually chaotic, thin, irregular, high-contrast lines running in unpredictable directions across an otherwise organized space. Research on visual clutter specifically identifies irregular, high-contrast linear elements as disproportionately demanding of visual attention compared to their actual size, precisely because their chaotic, non-repeating pattern gives the visual system nothing predictable to latch onto and dismiss. A single tangle of visible cords behind a television or desk can occupy a surprisingly large share of a room's perceived visual clutter, despite taking up a tiny fraction of its actual physical space. Japanese interior design and product culture places notable emphasis on concealing this exact category of visual noise, cord management, hidden outlets, furniture designed specifically to route and hide cables, treating it as a genuine design priority rather than an afterthought most Western interiors leave completely unaddressed. The shift, the same room, with its cords bundled and hidden instead of left visibly tangled, removes a disproportionately large source of visual chaos relative to how little physical space those cords actually occupy, one of the highest impact, lowest effort changes available in an otherwise finished room. That is habit number 3. Now, habit number 4, and this one is about what actually gets displayed, not what gets hidden. Habit number 4. A single, rotating focal point of display, rather than many scattered decorative objects. Most homes distribute decoration broadly, a little bit of decor on nearly every surface, spread evenly throughout the space. Traditional Japanese interiors more commonly concentrate visual interest into a single deliberate focal point instead, most classically the tokonoma, a small dedicated alcove holding one seasonal arrangement, one piece of art, or one carefully chosen object, changed periodically, with the rest of the room left comparatively bare. Here's the mechanism. This connects directly to a well-documented principle in visual perception sometimes described through contrast and figure-ground relationships. A single point of visual interest, placed within an otherwise restrained field, draws and holds attention far more effectively, and far more calmly, than the same visual interest distributed as many smaller points scattered throughout a busy space. When decoration is spread evenly across a room, the eye has no clear place to rest and no clear place to focus. It's continuously scanning between many competing smaller points instead of settling on one. A single deliberate focal point, by contrast, gives the eye somewhere specific and satisfying to land, with the surrounding restraint making that one object feel considered rather than sparse. The shift, the same overall amount of decoration, concentrated into one deliberate focal point instead of scattered evenly across many surfaces, produces a calmer, more intentional feeling room, not because there's necessarily less decor overall, but because the eye finally has one clear place to rest instead of many competing ones. That is habit number 4. Now, habit number 5, the one I told you at the very start, determines whether this peaceful feeling actually lasts. Stay here, because this is the most important thing in this entire video. Habit number 5. A standing one in, one out rule. Nothing new enters the space without something else deliberately leaving it. This last habit isn't about the room's current state at all. It's about why a home, decluttered and calmed once, so often quietly refills itself back to its original cluttered state within a matter of months. Here's what I mean. A single decluttering effort, however thorough, addresses the home's current inventory of objects, but does nothing about the ongoing rate at which new objects continue entering the space afterward. Without a standing rule governing that ongoing rate, a home that was genuinely, deliberately calm tends to drift back toward its previous density over time, simply because new purchases, gifts, and accumulated items keep arriving while almost nothing routinely leaves. This connects directly to danshari, refusing what you don't need, discarding what's excess, treated not as a single event, but as an ongoing standing practice. A fixed one in, one out rule. A new object entering the home requires deliberately choosing an existing object to donate, discard, or remove, keeps the total density of the space essentially fixed indefinitely, turning the peaceful, decluttered state from a one-time achievement into a maintained, permanent condition. Without this rule, every one of the previous 4 habits is temporary, destined to be slowly undone by the ordinary, ongoing accumulation that every home experiences by default. The shift: you don't need to declutter your home again every few months for the rest of your life. You need one standing rule that keeps the total volume of what enters and leaves roughly balanced, and that single rule is what turns a peaceful home from a temporary state you achieved once into a permanent one you never have to fully redo. That is habit number 5. Here is everything in one breath. Leave surfaces and walls deliberately, visibly empty in places, rather than fully covered. Build around a limited, muted color palette instead of many competing colors. Hide or bundle every visible cord and cable in the room. Concentrate decoration into a single rotating focal point instead of scattering it evenly. And apply a standing one in, one out rule so the calm you create doesn't quietly refill itself back to where it started. 5 habits. None of them require new furniture, a renovation, or a single trip to a store. Every single one begins with what's already sitting in the room around you right now. Your home was never actually the wrong home. It simply had more in it, visually, than your eyes were ever built to comfortably rest in, and nobody had ever handed you the specific, small reductions that quietly fix that. Now you have them. So here's what I want from you before you close this video. Right now, tell me in the comments which one of these 5 your home is most missing. Is it number 1, is every single surface and wall in your home currently covered with something? Is it number 3, do you have a literal tangle of visible cords behind your TV or desk right now? Is it number 5, have you tried decluttering before, only to watch the space quietly fill back up again a few months later? Tell me the number, 1 through 5, in the comments right now, because naming it is the first step, and someone reading your comment might recognize their own living room in it and finally decide to change it this weekend. If this changed how you think about your home, send it to the one person you know whose space always feels a little more chaotic than they'd like, without ever being able to say exactly why. They're 5 small reductions away from finally finding out. I'll see you in the next one.